What's up, y'all? Thanks for tuning in and welcome to another episode of Lessons Learned with me, your girl, She216. This show is brought to you and inspired by the hottest new urban drama out, the novel Lessons Learned, by yours truly, the one and only She216. We're here to bring you the raw and uncut truth from the lives of everyday people just like you and me. From the hottest topics to news stories, She216 got the remedy for what you need to make it through this screwed up thing called life. Now let's get into it. Alright, so I asked you, could I shoot you for the channel She216? I'm an author, okay? My name's She216. I got an urban drama out called Lessons Learned.
Yeah.
And so basically I be out here talking to the people, just getting their input. So what you say might be able to help somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
Just encourage them to keep hope alive, keep doing what you're doing, keep believing in God and His Son Jesus, and go on.
Is that what you believe?
Yeah.
Or you just saying that because that's what you know people want?
No. I just want because I love and care for others too. Because, you know, when people help me, you know what I'm saying, I accept that. And I go on, you know what I'm saying, try to help others.
I understand you.
Yeah.
Did you see this fire that happened over here in this apartment over here?
I seen it. I seen it up there.
That's crazy. And they said they found a body in there and everything.
Yeah, things happen. I know.
Crazy. So look, let's start from the beginning. Tell the people your name and where you from.
Love Priscilla from originally from Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Okay, my family from Alabama, from Sawyerville.
Oh, okay.
It's like 30 minutes outside of Greensboro.
Yeah, that's where I'm originally from.
So sis, how life been treating you?
Okay, it's been treating me fair.
It's been treating you fair?
Okay, I can't complain about nothing bad.
Right, we could, but don't nobody really give a right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
She said she won't. She said I'll pump the gas. She's gonna do $2 pump.
Yeah, she go pump it. Oh, babe, she go. Okay, okay. Let him pump it, love. You focus on the interview. So, let me ask you.
Yes.
What's your lessons learned so far? If you could give me three.
Go to school and, you know what I'm saying, get a career, get a job or whatever, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your plan moving forward in life? Like, what's your plan for the rest of your life?
I'll get a job and, you know what I'm saying, have more children and get apartments and houses.
You want more kids?
Yeah.
How many kids you got?
4.
You got 4?
Yeah.
How old are they?
1 22, 1 18, 1 6, and 1 8 years old.
Oh my goodness. We're the 6 and the 8-year-old right now.
My mom's house.
With your mom?
Yeah.
Mom, like big mama, right?
Yeah.
She holds stuff down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I gotta go. Okay.
All right, well, you stay encouraged, okay?
One of the most pervasive stereotypes about Black Americans is that of the absent Black father.
The absent Black father myth is the idea, the stereotypical and incorrect notion that African American fathers have very little contact with their children, if any contact at all.
And in Black America, the reality of being fatherless is perhaps most painful.
73% of all Black babies are born out of wedlock.
Experts say there's a crisis when it comes to Black fathers in this country.
The news media loves asking where all the Black fathers are, and that whole idea has been linked to everything from poverty and crime to even police violence against Black communities.
Why are these police shootings occurring? Well, it's because there is an absent Black father, or it's because Black families are on welfare.
But this idea that Black fathers aren't present in their kids' lives is actually false.
To be a parent is to have children that you love and try and support. And Black fathers experience that the same way that anyone else would. Why would you even think there was a difference?
Hey guys, I'm Sana, and this Sunday on AJ Plus, we're gonna talk about the myth of the absent Black father here in the United States, where it comes from, and how that stereotype tells a much bigger story about the Black family and Black communities in this country. Just because the trope of the absent Black father is so pervasive doesn't mean it's true. Now, yes, according to a Centers for Disease Control report, in 2013, 72% of non-Hispanic Black women who gave birth were unmarried. But being an unmarried mother doesn't automatically mean that the father isn't involved. And in fact, that's exactly what that CDC report found. When compared to white or Hispanic fathers, Black fathers were actually more likely to be involved in their children's lives in almost every way. They were even more likely to have bathed, diapered, or dressed their kids, eaten a meal with them, played with them, helped them with homework, and taken them to and from activities. And a lot of that held true even when Black fathers didn't live with their children. But if we go solely off of what we see in the news media,
where's your dad?
Don't really know.
Tell me about that.
He's just not around.
You wouldn't really see Black fathers in that way. Communications professor Travis Dixon studies the prevalence of stereotypes in mass media and the impact of these stereotypes on audiences. He wrote this report, A Dangerous Distortion of Our Families, and in it he found that almost all news and opinion media implicitly or explicitly encourages pretty egregious assumptions about Black fathers. Black fathers were shown spending time with their kids only half as often as white fathers, contrary to, well, the actual facts.
We found that Black mothers, white fathers interacted with their kids about 26% of the time in these videos and photos that occurred in the news media. Half as often, we found that happening for Black fathers. Only about 14% of the time were Black fathers actually interacting with their kids on camera in photos.
Dixon also found that news commentary singled out Black fathers 60% of the time compared to white fathers only 20% of the time.
What has it been like since your dad's been in jail? Can a father's love break through prison walls?
That media distortion is substantial. We know for a fact that African American fathers are just as likely to participate in the lives of their children than fathers of other races.
And this isn't, by the way, a politically partisan issue. Both conservative news outlets like Fox News and more centrist ones like CNN were top distorters, specifically Hannity, The Kelly File, and CNN Tonight.
Did both of you have fathers present in your lives growing up?
So where does this toxic idea about Black fathers even come from? Well, one theory takes it back to a 1965 report titled The Negro Family, The Case for National Action. The report became one of the most contentious political documents in 20th century America. Democrat and Assistant Secretary of Labor Daniel Patrick Moynihan put the report together to make the argument for how the Lyndon B. Johnson administration had to do more for racial equality than simply pass the Voting Rights Act. Moynihan argued that to really fight racial inequality, the government had to understand the state of Black communities and why they were the way they were. But Moynihan ended up focusing on one thing: the Black family. According to him, the fundamental reason for growing economic inequality between white and Black Americans was a crumbling family structure in Black communities. And at the foundation of the so-called crumbling Black family structure was the absent Black father. Moynihan looked at non-marital birth rates and rates of fathers living separately from their children and made a whole bunch of assumptions about parents' relationship statuses and parental involvement. The report didn't take into account factors like the legacy of slavery, generational wealth, or even economic migration in which men left their homes so that they could provide for their families. We spoke to Carvel Wallace, a writer and a podcaster, about the way Black families have been discussed in the mainstream.
Reading some of the literature at that time, I was shocked at how overtly racist liberal literature was in terms of trying to diagnose the ills of the Black community and trying to explain why these uprisings were happening, and everyone was blaming it on the fathers and drugs and families and welfare and mothers and everything. It was a lot more convenient for the story to be told that Black people weren't holding up their end of the bargain rather than acknowledging that America wasn't holding up its end of the bargain.
The Moynihan report ultimately created three camps: the liberal camp, which saw the report as a foundation for policy change; the conservative camp, which saw the report as a justification for the argument that Black communities were responsible for their own issues; and then the left-wing camp that saw the report as blaming the victim, ignoring structural racism, and actually reinforcing racism. So what happens when people are exposed to these stereotypes about Black families? Aside from the reinforcement of the idea that Black communities have no one to blame but themselves, there's the everyday real-life impact these stereotypes have through policies and support for those policies. First, there's an almost total willful ignorance about the impact of slavery and modern-day incarceration on Black American families. Foundationally, slavery ripped apart Black families, and mass incarceration has put 1 in 12 Black men between the ages of 25 and 54 in prison, versus 1 in 60 for non-Black groups. Then there's how these characterizations of Black American families have an impact on policies that affect all Americans. Take poverty, for instance. During the Great Depression era, the face of poverty was a white man who was down on his luck, or a white family fallen victim to circumstances outside their control. And the country felt a duty to end poverty, namely with President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Then, decades later, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. began to shed light on the reality of poor Black American families living in cities, and the reporters who followed him began to report on these issues.
We are tired of living in run-down, dilapidated, rat-infested shacks and slums.
And as a result of that, over time, all of the imagery began to focus on these Black families, and it began to actually have a pernicious impact. It began to have us think of poverty and Black families as tied to this issue of Black laziness. And that's where we largely find ourselves today.
According to Pew, more than half of Republicans believe a lack of effort is to blame for poverty instead of circumstances beyond one's control. As the conversation on poverty and race shifted, so did the support for welfare.
People began to think that we needed to curb welfare benefits, increase work requirements, because the real problem is that Black people are on welfare and they want to just be lazy. When we think about policies, what's good for families, we tend to think about them in these racialized terms. And when we do that, we tend to have a distorted view of what needs to happen.
So what's the solution? Well, here's what Dixon and Wallace had to say.
The main way that the media perpetuates stereotypes and racist tropes is accidentally. I think the people who are in the decision-making rooms and the content-making rooms are carrying these biases with them without knowing they're carrying them with them because there's no one around to challenge them. So I think that ultimately greater diversity at all levels of decision-making in the media and content process is probably our best chance of dealing with this.
As an African-American father myself, as the father of twin sons, I take pride in that role. And I know many, many other Black fathers who take pride in being involved with their kids, regardless of the marital situation with the mother. And so I really would like the media to show some of those stories as well.
Ultimately, I'm raising my kids to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. You know?
My position is that the Black woman's disrespect and rebellion against the leadership and the authority of the Black man is a direct cause of the breakdown in our Black family structure. Now, of course, there are many Black people who consider those fighting words, because as Black women, we have never been subject to the kind of examination that our men have been subject to since we have been here. We have been somewhat protected and shielded from any kind of critiquing about our personal behavior, whereas our men have always been up for examination. The book is not an attack on Black women. I have never said that all Black women do everything that I list in my book. None of us have lived long enough to do everything that I list in the book, but most of us do some of the things that I've listed in my book. And I do say that it is not because of generalizations that we are all victimized by some of the negative patterns of behavior in the book, but the book just represents our collective contribution. This is some of everything that we have done, or that we do daily, that contributes to the breakup of our relationship, the destruction of our man, and the failure of our children to be able to function. They did not tell us that all of that, being my own person and I'm independent, would lead to separation, loneliness, celibacy, and lesbianism. They didn't tell us that if you give up the man, you're gonna take one of these things and it's worse and it will destroy your nation. They didn't give us that information. They made us think that it was some kind of glorified position to brag about the fact that I got my own job, my own credit card, my own car, so I don't need no man. I don't even know how we got that mixed up. Ain't none of that got nothing to do with being with no man. We have some serious relationship problems that nobody has been able to address us on because everybody wants to pretend that this is not going on. Over 60% of our women are single, widowed, separated, or divorced. They don't have a man. I just came out of Florida and they got a housing complex that the Urban League built, which is a Black organization that is for women and children only. They say they don't allow any men in there. I didn't have time to deal with it, but I talked about them real bad. That's the silliest program I've ever heard of. You know them women that had men if they got a bunch of children. They need fathers. They need protection. We hear about the drug problem that we have in our projects across the country. It's one of the major places that we have a drug problem. You know, we talk about the great strength that we have as black women. Well, the welfare department don't rent government apartments to single black men. Those apartments belong to black women who are allowing this to go on in their home. We have not looked at what part of the responsibility do we share. Yes, black men sell a lot of drugs, and a lot of us black women get the money from them drugs and buy some of these fancy clothes we wear. Drive around in some of these fancy cars. He is not doing these things alone and without support from us, whether they are good or bad. See, we have a lot of power. We are very strong women. I'm saying that we're using our strength in the wrong direction. We're using it to tear our man down, tear our nation down, instead of building it up. Having an education and a job does not necessarily mean you have a successful life. I keep telling black women that to raise a child, they say, well, I provided with food, clothing, and shelter. That's not raising a child, that's maintaining one. To raise a child, you need a parental coalition of a man and a woman. We have sons who, by not having a father in the home, they don't know how to respect women. They take on the black female emotionalism. They're doubtful, they're indecisive, they can't make a decision. They don't know what to do about being a man because we can't teach them that. We don't have that knowledge. We have daughters who grow up in a home where they don't see any affection, where there's no man there. They go out into the world and try to mate. They don't have no idea how to be no woman to no man, how to function in a house with a man, because they haven't seen it. Most of our children, just like us, get all the information we have about how you be with a mate off television. It's the only medium that shows us anybody being together. Those rules have not worked for us. The white woman's liberation movement, we don't have anything to do with that. We have not been under the control of the black man for over 500 years, so what do we have to get liberated from them from? They haven't been our boss. That's the white woman and her man. They're going through that, and that's their business. We don't have any business being in that. They only introduced it to break down the civil rights movement. Civil rights movement started with the black man, the black woman, and the black child standing together, trying to plead for freedom, justice, and equality, and more benefits in the country that they had built. They threw the white woman in there with the women's liberation movement and made it a woman against man thing. That created a big separation between black men and black women, because then everybody started going for self. Then they bring the welfare system in and tell us in order to feed and clothe and house our children, we have to give up our man. You have to put the man out of the house. When the white farm wife goes to the government for subsidy for the farm, they don't tell her to get rid of the farmer, they keep that family together. But in the black community, they make it a requirement, because they want to keep endorsing into the black community that the black man is no good, and that he is not deserving of respect, he is not deserving of us letting him give us any protection or instruction, and that we are better than them. The major responsibility that the black woman has had on the earth for the trillions of years that we have been here has been one of nutrition and birthing children. Those two things have a great deal to do with the survival of any people, the reproduction of the nation, and feeding them the proper food so that they can live. Those are very important jobs. Those are very powerful positions, because it puts us in a position to decide who's going to live or die, and how slow they're going to die by what we feed them. We have a very powerful position. That's not a small role that we play. We have just been taught to misrepresent and misuse that power.
I was so broke I couldn't